afternoon, everybody. How are you guys?
Good afternoon. Fabulous.
Awesome. I am Jessica Durham from Boise, Idaho. Today I am going to be discussing with you all the Idaho Commission Core. So a little bit of background on what we're going to go through in the next hour. In Idaho, licensees have to take a core class every single year. So they are required to take 2 unique core classes every renewal period. I like to reference the core class as the Real Estate Commission's way of having a team meeting with every licensee in the state. How many of us have had some sort of corporate role or something where we have to, have a team meeting with our manager? Right? Yeah, so we're used to that. We have to disseminate the information and hopefully not lose much in the game of telephone on the way down to make sure that every licensee that's out there working with our consumers understands what's expected of them. So for the next hour, we're going to do some review on some of those baseline guidelines for the state of Idaho, licensee expectations, if you will. How I'm going to walk you through this is by giving you a little bit of baseline knowledge, and hopefully we're going to have a little bit of fun and do some kind of games as we go along to make sure that we can ensure that everybody learned what they were supposed to learn along the way. So with that, let's get started here. Our first guideline that we're going to discuss is advertising. When it comes to advertising in the state of Idaho, we have 4 components that are really important to reference in every advertising component. Just by show of hands, when we think of advertising, does social media come to mind?
Absolutely.
Yes. Right?
Yeah.
Does print advertising come to mind?
Absolutely.
Yeah? Great. How about if I have, we're just gonna say, Jim, you have Columbia on your shirt. What if my brokerage name was Columbia? Do we think of clothing and apparel as an advertising component? Right?
Yes.
Sometimes we forget that any time we're conveying knowledge about us being a licensee to the general public, that is advertising. So by definition, when we're talking through, the definition of advertising in the state commission's perspective, it is conveying any sort of real estate message. Maybe it's just about me personally. Maybe it's about a certain property I'm marketing, or a loan program, or something like that. That is advertising. And when we convey that information, there are 4 components we have to remember. So we're going to break those down, and then we're going to do a little quiz kind of activity to make sure that we all understand how to differentiate an appropriate ad from an inappropriate ad. So first up, here's our little list of some of the ideas to get you thinking about this. We named a few of them. Car wraps is one of them. Does anybody have a car wrap? Has anyone had one in their career? I will openly admit that my first year being a licensed realtor, I was loud and proud, putting it all over my car. And then along the way, one of my brokers said, that's probably pretty dangerous being a young gal. They can just, kind of know more about you than probably is appropriate. And my spidey sense turned on, and I got rid of that car wrap. Telephone directories, probably not really going to be happening too much anymore, but you kind of get the idea. We're going to talk through all of the different ideas when it comes to advertising. So our first component of those 4 segments that I mentioned is that in the state of Idaho, only folks who have an active Idaho license are allowed to actively market Idaho properties. In Idaho, and maybe this is something that happens in Arizona on some of your borders, but in Idaho, we have some areas where we have brokerages that are licensed both in Utah and Idaho, in Wyoming and Idaho, and in Oregon and Idaho, and then a little bit up on the Montana side. If I work for a brokerage that is licensed in both, we'll say, Wyoming and Idaho, my brokerage has the authority to market those properties. But if I don't have that license as an independent contractor, I don't have a license in both of those states, I don't have the authority to share one of my peers in my office. I can't share their social media advertisement because now I am engaging in marketing a property in a state that I don't have a license to sell real estate in. That is the most common mistake when it comes to this portion of the advertising code. Next up we have, yes?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Kim?
I'm trying to wrap my brain around this. Licensed in Idaho and Wyoming, so if I'm physically in Idaho, the Idaho rules apply. And I have a team member in a company that's close to the border. I have a team member that's licensed in Wyoming and Idaho, and they have a listing in Wyoming. Is that what we're talking about? So then I want to share their listing with some buyers that I think might be interested. Is that what I'm not allowed to do?
Exactly, that's perfect. So one of the examples that comes up often is exactly this. And thank you so much, Kim, for that question. When we have, for those that maybe didn't hear it in the back, Kim's question was, if I work in a brokerage that has Wyoming and Idaho, but she's not licensed in Idaho, can she share that post with some buyers that might be interested? And the answer is, if you don't have the license in the state where the property is, then you can't share that post, because I'm conveying that I have the knowledge on that property, but I haven't gone through the proper channels to get the license there to sell that property and really have the full knowledge on the regulations in that state. Does that answer your question?
I think it does, and I guess to sum it all up, if I'm going to work out of an office brokerage that works in both states, and I'm going to want to potentially market for both states, I need to obtain a license in both states.
Yes, in short, if you want to continue to help your colleagues by sharing their listings, then yes, you would need to get a license in both states. If you want to just stay in the Idaho lane or stay in the Wyoming lane, you are absolutely welcome to hang your license at a brokerage that's licensed in more states, but you don't want to engage in advertising a property in a place that you don't have a license to sell real estate. Does that answer it?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So let's go on to our next component of advertising. And our next one, oopsies, is that all advertised property has to clearly and conspicuously, so we'll talk about what that means, clearly and conspicuously state the licensed brokerage name. If I work for a franchise, let's say, if I work for maybe Coldwell Banker or Keller Williams or any of those larger franchises, I have to state the full licensed brokerage name. One of the larger organizations in our area where I work is Coldwell Banker Tomlinson Group. So that is their full license name. That's what appears on their license with the Idaho Real Estate Commission. They have a very great little logo that has CBTG. It's got the acronym for them. I can't use that alone on my advertisements. I may prefer the way it looks, but the consumer doesn't know what that means. They need to understand in any messaging that I have what the full name of my brokerage is. And this includes if you work for a branch office. If, let's say, I have a Coldwell Banker Tomlinson Group branch office, which is maybe a city in our area, it's maybe going to be a little metropolitan called Eagle or Boise, I need to add that to my marketing as well. So wherever I am putting this out, if it's on my apparel, if it's on my car wrap, most of the time we think just print advertisements and social media advertisements. But as we're discussing, advertising is so much bigger than that. So that is our next component. Next up we have, this is the branch one. And then lastly we have that no advertisements can be misleading in nature. So we have to convey in a truthful manner to the consumer whatever it is that we're trying to talk about. We'll have in our little quiz portion some examples of things that might come off as misleading versus things that are very truthful. Does anybody have any examples? I'm assuming, and I don't want to jump to an assumption, but I'm assuming maybe in our careers we've seen some inappropriate or misleading advertisements. Anyone have any that you'd like to share? Elizabeth?
Pictures.
Okay, can you give us an example?
So you take a picture of a house and it looks like it's really big or really modern, and it's that they changed the lighting or they changed the wall colors or they use a fisheye camera.
Yes, I love that. So for anyone that didn't hear Elizabeth's example, through pictures. Where I've seen that come about too is with this new fad of virtual staging. Has anyone utilized virtual staging? It can really make a room shine, but is that truthful? Is it misleading to our consumer if the room is so tiny that I can't actually fit a real life couch in it, so I have to put a pretend one in? Is that misleading to the consumer, right?
I would say yes.
Yeah, I would concur. Thank you, Kim. Yes, Brenda.
So what if you have a now and a future? Like I show you what it looks right now, and I show you what it could look like, and I have a disclaimer, this has been enhanced. Is that okay? Like I showed you.
Yes, thank you, Brenda. Brenda's asking if we have a before and then maybe we show what the potential could be. I could see this maybe with staging or maybe some paint refreshing, some of those types of things. Is that okay? And the answer would be yes. If we're in a situation where I've shown them what it currently looks like and then I've helped the consumer to say, what could it be? How could it be better? Absolutely, I would say that's great marketing, honestly, and really good technique to show the potential buyer the full parameter of what a property could look like. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to take what we have learned here and we are going to practice a little bit. So how this is going to work is we are going to see some mock advertisements pop up on the screen. And I like to just use a simple thumbs up, thumbs down. If we think based on the components that you just learned, so I'll recap that. We have to make sure that the licensed brokerage name is clearly and conspicuously stated. What that really equates to is I might have the Jessica Durham Realty team, and then maybe I work at Tracy Frazier Brokerage. I can't have my name be massive and have Tracy's name, my brokerage name, be so tiny that the consumer can't see it or that it's hidden somewhere. So it has to be clear and conspicuous. It has to be the full brokerage name. So remember what I was talking about with acronyms and how we can't utilize acronyms, full brokerage name. And then remember misleading. So we can't be misleading in any way, shape, or form. And then our main one is that Idaho component. Do I have a license to actually market properties in Idaho? So that's what we're going to be looking for, the baseline in this activity. As they come up on the screen, I would love for you to say, yep, no, and then if anyone be willing to raise your hand on what it is that was that kicker to show you whether it was appropriate or inappropriate, and then I'll call on you and we'll talk through it. Of course, this is a learning thing. This is reviewing the guidelines, so don't feel poorly if you don't get the first couple right. That's why we're doing this, so we can learn. So here's our first one. Leslie Knope. Do we think Leslie's good or bad? She's okay. Okay. What do we think? Anyone want to share why you think she's either good or bad? Nancy, what do you think?
I think that Pawnee City Realty LLC should be at least as big as Leslie Knope Broker, if not bigger.
Okay. Great point. Steve.
In Idaho, you don't define what clear and conspicuous is in numbers or anything.
We do not. Thank you, Steve. Steve's question was, in Idaho, do we differentiate on size? I know in some states there are some font components that come into play, and in Idaho we don't. In fact, there used to be a portion of our regulations that stated that it needed to be posted. If I was driving by at the posted speed limit, would I be able to read the brokerage name? And they took that language out because, well, I'm alluding to this, but not all drivers probably drive the same. We don't all have the same, visual ability. My husband would say that I drive like a grandma, so I'm going to see it in the loud and clear. So to answer your question, no font components, any of that. When that portion was taken away from the actual advertising guideline, the new kind of component of that is, would a reasonable person be able to go and look at that and identify what the brokerage name is? So it could be a little bit smaller, it doesn't have to be exact. So I saw some other thumbs up. For our folks that had thumbs up, anyone want to share? Jim? Yeah. No, you're fine. You think it's good?
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty excellent. You know, I think she's done a nice job.
Awesome. Let's
Of course,
see.
she's identified herself.
Yeah,
My presumption is here, and maybe that's incorrect, is that she is the responsible broker, the designated broker, and so on. And if she's not, then that could be misleading.
Thank you for that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that really quick. One of the things that's really important to remember is when we're talking through brokers in the state of Idaho, there are 3 names by which brokers can be referred to. We have a designated broker, a responsible broker, and we have what's called an associate broker. All of those brokers have gone through the same level of education. There's not one that's gone any further. It really boils down to how they practice in their business and what their authority is in their brokerage. So in Idaho, an associate broker is anyone who's gone through the broker level licensing training and obtained that license. It's a little bit more than our salesperson license. So that's an associate broker. And then we have what's called a designated broker. The designated broker is the broker who has gone through the same level of education, but they have been deemed by their company to be the one in charge. So they ultimately own all the listings and all the contracts. They're referenced on all of the forms and the paperwork. They are the man in charge, man or woman in charge. And then we have our responsible broker. On a contract, on a purchase and sale agreement in Idaho to be valid, we have to have a responsible broker named. That responsible broker name has to be one of the designated brokers on the transaction. So when we're talking through a dual agency transaction, let's say, where I am the designated broker on both sides of the deal, the seller and the buyer are both represented within my brokerage, I'm the only option for the responsible broker. That's going to be my name. Let's say Kim and I are on opposite sides of the transaction, and Kim is the designated broker on the listing side, and I am the designated broker on the buyer's side. It's then up to the parties. They can decide which company is going to be noted as a responsible broker. Most of the time, the trend is that it is on the buyer's side. The mindset there is the buyer's the one putting the earnest money in, and so if there's a dispute on earnest money, maybe we need to have the buyer's broker be the one that makes the decision, but that's not a requirement by state statute. Okay, everybody good on brokers? So when it comes to that, we don't actually have to disclose what level license we are on our signage. We only have to go through those 4 main components. So thank you, Jim. Yes, Stormy.
So on your designated broker, do they have to have a certain amount of years in experience to become that broker in charge or designated broker?
Yes, thank you, Stormy. So Stormy's question was, in order to be a designated broker, is there a certain time frame of experience or sales volume that needs to come into play in order to be named as that person? And the answer is yes. In order to be a designated broker, I have to do a couple of things, the education component obviously, but when it comes to time frame in the business, I have to have had an active business practice as a salesperson for 2 out of the last 5 years, and there's a transaction volume as well. The transaction volume, you're kind of probably gonna chuckle because the volume amount's pretty low, it's only 2 million. However, it has to be a minimum of 15 transaction sides. I don't believe that 2 million has been updated since prices decided to poof, because our median price point now is the mid 500s in our market. So pretty easy to get to the 2 million, but you still have to get to the 15 transaction sides. You're welcome. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's see how we do on this next one. How about Andy Dwyer? Do we think he's good or bad? Bad? Okay, anyone want to volunteer why he's bad?
Look at that face, I mean.
Spencer's like, what?
Where's the broker name?
Where's the broker name? Thank you. Let's see, what's your name? Mary, awesome. Thank you, Mary. Where's the broker name? Andy forgot his brokerage name. Andy is not doing so hot. He did not put his full licensed brokerage name on there. Funny face too, I'll go with Spencer on that. Pretty funny face. Okay, next up, we've got a social media post here. Let's see what we think. Seeing some no's, I'm seeing some no's. I love it. What is our reason? Anyone want to volunteer? Brenda?
I don't know what WA is.
That's why it's standing
Is
for
it
Washington. But you're on the right track. Thank you, Brenda. Brenda says, I don't know what WA is. That's the issue with this ad. If we read a little bit further on, Ann Perkins is clearly marketing this for sale property in Hawkins, Idaho. And then down here at the very bottom, it mentions that she's only licensed in Washington and Oregon. And as you saw at the top, it says Ann Perkins WA Real Estate, which is Washington Real Estate. Ann doesn't have the authority to market that property. She's not licensed in Idaho. Good job, Brenda. Perfect. This is an example of what Kim and I were referencing happens so often. And again, this isn't me being a Pollyanna, but I genuinely think when these mistakes happen, it's not an intentional malicious thing. Licensees, if Kim and I are in a brokerage together, I want to help her, right? I want to help share her listings. I want to maybe bring buyers to them. And so this tends to happen more frequently because people want to help each other out, but they don't go through the legal protocols to do that. Jim, I saw your hand pop up.
Would it be common for a licensee to put what she's done at the bottom here, that she's experienced licensed to sell real estate in Washington and Oregon? That sounds rather unusual that someone would put that in an ad.
Thank you, Jim. So Jim is asking, is that normal protocol to put where you're licensed at? For our border cities in Idaho, it's very common. Where I live and practice the majority of my real estate transactions, and it's actually our largest metropolitan in the state of Idaho, and the largest population of realtors, we're only a half an hour from Oregon. So it's pretty common if I have a license in both places for me to put that in my advertisements. If I'm smack dab in the middle of the state, probably going to be weird for me to put that on my advertisements. But in areas where that advertisement is going to speak to a consumer that might care about that border population, it is referenced in those advertisements. Alicia, yes?
Yes, Jennifer, with the ad, if, I think it's Amy, had a link to click on where you could see the name of the brokerage, would that be acceptable?
Yes, to click the link, Alicia's asking, is it okay to put a link within an ad? That is yes, that's totally okay. In fact, if there's, let's say, not an opportunity to put in a link like Twitter, that's now known as X, sometimes there's a character count on some of these portals. If there's a character count and I can't fit in my brokerage name, then I actually have to make sure it's within one click of wherever my advertisement component is. If it's a portion of my name, so for example, in this portion underneath the address it says listed by Ann Perkins of Homes of Eagleton, so she said her brokerage name. But if perhaps that wasn't available, within one click of me seeing this advertisement, I need to be able to find out where her broker is what the guideline states. Okay, everybody feel good about this one? Let's see our next one. So no, Ann was not good. Next up we have a website. Call Tom and treat yourself. Do we think Tom's okay? Ish. I see some thumbs up. I see some ish. Anyone want to raise your hand and tell me what you think the answer is? Elizabeth?
He has his licensed brokerage name, and that's the only really requirement.
Perfect. Elizabeth said he has his licensed brokerage name, and really that's the baseline requirement. So when we think back to those 4 requirements, Elizabeth hit it spot on. A lot of times folks will say, well, he doesn't have his phone number. Well, he doesn't have his address. Well, he doesn't. When we went through those 4 components, they never said that we had to put in our contact information. They just said that we have to have the licensed brokerage name. So Elizabeth, thank you so much. That was exactly correct. Tom did good. Next up we have April Ludgate. What do we think? So it's kind of hard to tell, but this is intended to be a billboard. You're driving down the freeway, you're going 70, 80 miles an hour.
Only one person.
What do we think? Is she okay or no? I'm seeing some no's. Okay. Anyone with a no? Yes, Deb.
It's a little misleading,
Yes.
like a lot.
It
I get my glasses and read real carefully for
What
what
is
I
the
have.
sign plan say?
So this tiny little line says only one person surveyed, so Deb
Oh.
hit it on the head. When we're driving down the freeway and I'm going, 60, 70 miles an hour and all I see is April, look, it's awesome. And that's not the reality. She only surveyed one person and maybe it was just her mom or her spouse or her business partner, right? So definitely misleading, definitely not gonna work. She does have a broker's name on there, but a misleading statistic is gonna throw you over into the land of defrauding consumers, and we don't want that to happen in our profession. We want them to trust us. Okay, got a couple more, and then we'll move on to our next guideline. How about sell with Julia? Seeing some no's, a lot of no's. Anyone who sees the no, wanna raise your hand and volunteer what you think it is?
We don't see a firm name involved, is that right?
That is correct, Spencer, thank you. Spencer says we don't see a firm name. Sell with Julia did not put her licensed brokerage name on there. So, this
Hold
is
on,
gonna-
hold on. Okay. Wind
Yeah.
backwards. You said if it was one click.
Oh, yes, with one click. So if this was just the advertisement, they don't really tell us what this is. It has her Facebook page, but they don't really tell us what this is. But yes, you're absolutely correct. Nancy said, you said it was one click. As long as it's one click away, let's just say this was a Facebook ad or social media or not like a printed business card or something. If it's a business card, she's not compliant, right? Because I'm not clicking anything.
Right.
Yeah, I can't click the business card. If this is an online component, if I can click within one click and see what her brokerage name is, she's gonna be okay. Yes, thank you, Nancy. Yes,
Is
Mary.
one click only if you can't fit it? Because I've heard that happen in some states, that if it's not big enough and you can do it in one click, it's okay. But if it's big enough, you should put the full name.
Thank you, Mary. I always recommend when it comes to this one-click rule, here's my thought process. We started out talking about the sharing of the advertisements across state borders. If I put that advertisement on and I don't put my brokerage name on it thinking, oh, it's just one click away, they can click my bio or anything like that and find it out, that's fine when it's just me sharing it. But part of the way that we get traction in social media is by having folks share our stuff, right? That's part of the reason why we do it. So I would say yes, if we're talking about the nitty-gritty of the regulations, you're probably gonna be okay on doing that. When it comes to the reality, none of us got real estate licenses to go and get in trouble with advertising compliance, right?
That's right.
So for the effort to just put it into my ad, I think it is absolutely worth it. One of the things when we wrap up our advertising section, there's a checklist that is available to every licensee to check each ad to make sure, does it meet the requirements? And I think that's part of that is, am I putting myself in a position of liability by putting an advertisement out like this? Or am I doing my best to engage the consumer and tell them about who Jessica Durham is without misleading them, without them wondering where I work, and any of those types of things. Okay. Next up we have another social media one. This one looks like maybe Twitter, maybe Instagram. What do we think? Good? Good. Seeing some positivity there. Okay. Anyone who has a thumbs up, want to volunteer what you think, what we think we have going on?
She has the brokerage name, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah,
Miss
go ahead,
Linda.
Liz.
That's what I was
She,
gonna say.
she has the brokerage name.
So she's good.
And the rules in Arizona are quite similar, except we say clear and prominent.
Okay.
We don't know what that means either. But but if the brokerage name is there, then we're covered.
I love that. Perfect. Liz is spot on. I think I saw, consistent thumbs up around here. This I like to actually use as an example on a number of ways that you can do this and make sure that you're going to be abiding by that one-click rule. So when we look through this ad, the handle on which this was originally posted is the brokerage name. It's Pawnee City Realty. Then they've gone and typed it in to their actual character count. We've got Pawnee City Realty LLC again. And they even went further and they put it in the hashtags. They didn't have to do all three of those, but this is a great example of choosing at least one of those components, and your one-click rule is not gonna ever really matter because you've got it in there. So this can be shared all through the internet and you'll be good to go. Yes, Tracy?
I have a question. If I were to just put the name of my brokerage as a hashtag, is that good enough?
Yes, Tracy asks if I just put the name of my brokerage as a hashtag, is that good enough? And the answer is yes, absolutely. As long as it makes itself into the post in some format, you're going to be good to go. Yeah. Okay, next up, we have just kind of a pamphlet. I think this is kind of a postcard. What do we think here?
I'm gonna ask a question
Yeah,
because
let's
in
see it.
some
Mary, go
states,
ahead.
you're not allowed to say it's free.
I love that. That is one of the components. So there's two things going on here. Mary said in some states you're not allowed to say that it's free, and that's exactly correct. We cannot charge for a CMA in the state of Idaho. We can still call it free. So the free word on this one is not illegal, is not against the regulation. However, we never want to charge for a CMA. So really important, while we can still call it free, it's very important for licensees to understand that doesn't mean that your client Venmos you later so that you can get paid off for it. The other component here, any thoughts on anything else that might be going on with this one? This one's a little tricky. Yeah, Spencer, let's hear it. What do you think?
Can they use the word, can a real estate agent use the word worth?
Worth. What is your home really worth? That's a great question. In Idaho, technically, yes.
What?
You would be okay to do that. I personally, as someone who instructs on different valuations, so I teach some courses on appraisals as well as CMA classes and broker price opinions. Those are our kind of three main components in Idaho. And I really, really think it's important to think about what Spencer is saying here when we're talking about opening ourselves up to liability. I think by saying, hey, what's your home worth? You could be walking into some territory of folks thinking maybe that you're an appraiser, right? So we'd really want to be careful with that language, yes. What the Real Estate Commission says on this one is so long as everyone in this photo is licensed, this is an allowable advertisement. So long as these folks, everyone in that picture is licensed, we're going to be okay.
What about the guy that you only see his tie but not his
I
head?
know.
Does he have to be licensed?
I love that. I don't know. I mean, does he have, maybe he's a headless man? I don't know. But I do like to kind of just pause and talk through this. The first time I ever taught this class, I was very happy it was the first time I taught it. I had someone raise their hand and they said, Jessica, for 20 years in this career, I have always dealt in farm and ranch. And I said, great, that's awesome. And she said, my photo, my image that I've always used is her, the licensee, shaking hands with a farmer while he is sitting on a horse. And she said, the horse isn't licensed.
True.
The farmer isn't licensed. So I actually called the commission on that because I wanted to make sure that I was going to be conveying the proper information. And obviously, how many of us have ever gone through rebranding ourselves and redoing our marketing? It is expensive, right? If that's this woman's identity, I don't want to be the person that tells her she can't have that identity anymore. So I called the commission and they chatted with me about this and they said, you know, when we're looking through this, none of that is intended to mislead the public, right? Yes, she could go above and beyond and say horse is not a licensed entity, and maybe make it comical, right? And do something a little bit more if she wanted to, but as long as we're not going through this, well, this is intended to defraud the public and be misleading, her advertising is probably gonna be okay. I kind of was given the takeaway of this is gonna be a case-by-case thing. But then I noticed, and you know, it's funny how things work in the world, as I'm out in the world and seeing realtors doing things, and again, I don't think that these things are typically malicious. I went and I saw a team website, where I know personally, because I know these folks, who has a real estate license and who doesn't. And that real estate website very much is calling the attention to every person on that team, both licensed and unlicensed. Anybody have any thoughts on why that could be an issue?
Well, as a consumer, if I call the office and I get your admin person who is not licensed, but they were in the picture of the ad, I might assume that they are. and their background and their experience may not be what it should be to meet my
Absolutely.
expectations.
That's perfect. Kim nailed it. Kim said, you know, if I call in and I'm looking at your website, or maybe I'm looking at all your advertisements, and I think that Steve has a real estate license, when in fact he doesn't, I'm gonna trust Steve to give me the same level of advice as maybe the designated broker might. And that's where we wanna curve that. In that group where we have all of these folks together, if I know that Tom is the only one that knows anything about real estate and everyone else are just his hype crowd, I want to talk to Tom as the consumer. I don't want to talk to the others. But if I don't know that, and if the advertisement leads me to believe that everybody has the same level of expertise, that's where we're going to run into issues. Awesome. Thank you so much, Kim. Yes, Jim?
And not only that, the designated broker is then in jeopardy, because if that unlicensed person is acting as a licensee, it goes up the chain of command if there's a problem.
Absolutely. Jim says, you know, designated broker is going to be on the hook for this if this continues to be a problem, right? The designated broker is the one, as I mentioned when we were talking through the different levels of brokers licensing, they're the one that is on every single form. Let's go back to my example with Steve. If Steve's not licensed, but I think he is, and Steve maybe is showing me properties or doing things that he's not allowed to do, are they going to go and take Steve's license? He doesn't have one to take, right? The DB, the designated broker at the top of the chain, they're the ones who's going to be on the hook for the misbehavior. So great point. Thank you, Jim. That's perfect. Okay, let's wrap it up. We have, as I mentioned, our advertisement checklist. So this checklist was prepared with the intention of helping every licensee to stay on track, to make sure that when it comes to your advertising components, that you have a quick, easy guideline to reference and make sure everything meets the requirements. This is where I kind of like to say, and just kind of gauge the room, has anyone in this room ever hired a web designer to help you with your website? Yeah, okay. Has anyone ever hired maybe a social media person to create some of your social media advertisements? Yeah. Do those people know the guidelines in your state? Right? So this checklist, it's great for licensees to keep. I know we all keep our stuff, you know, printed on our bedside table, and we refer back to it so we can stay on the straight and narrow. But the more valuable use for this checklist, and it continues on, is giving it to those folks that are helping you out, to your social media managers, to your web designers. We know what can be on our website, but they may not know what is allowed to be on the website. And both of those things, specifically social media and web, they're not cheap, right? We don't want to have to go back and make them redo it. So if I could give you, you know, a 2-cent takeaway on this particular component and guideline, of course know the baselines yourself, but also make sure that the people that you are allowing to do work on your behalf understand that at the end of the day, you're the one that falls down on the hook for it. They're not going to get in trouble by the commission, you will. Okay, any questions on advertising before we continue on to our next guideline?
Does
Yeah,
Idaho Real Estate Commission do this checklist?
This commission is provided by the Idaho Real Estate Commission. Yes, thank you, Nancy. Nancy had asked where this came from, and it's from the Idaho Real Estate Commission. Yeah, yes, sir, Jim.
How much scrutiny in reality do brokers get? Is the commission really paying attention to this? The consumer doesn't know, and I know from experience that if you go out and search 100 websites, you're going to find 50 violations.
Yes.
So is there a lot of reporting that goes on?
I love this question. Thank you, Jim. Jim's wondering, who's regulating this? Who's actually watching? So this is the area where I love it when people ask this question, Jim, thank you. How many of you guys care about our industry, right? Depending on where you originally got licensed, you probably spent a lot of time in a classroom to get the license. Now you want to keep the license, right? But it also is a whole as our industry. And Jim mentioned he could go look online and see probably 50 violations. And sadly, those violations are a direct reflection of each one of us. Even though we know the rules and we're doing the right thing, I jokingly say this, but sadly it's true. How many of us have ever dug ourselves out of a hole that another realtor dug for us? We're getting out because someone else put us in there. And it's because of their poor behavior. So I answer that kind of in a long way to give us some thought process, because I don't want to be known as the tattletale in my industry with my peers. I don't want to say, hey, you know, Steve, sorry I reported you for violating that ad, but here's my offer for your clients. It's going to be great. We can work together. So the way that this works in Idaho is that we are encouraged to report our peers. It's all anonymous. When I call into the commission, or if I see something on the MLS perhaps, I can click a little button and just within 2 seconds of my time, I can say, you know, whatever the issue is. Jessica made it look like you could actually put a real couch in this room, and you really can't. And so the reporting, it really doesn't take a lot of time out of the licensee's life, and it is anonymous. From there, the commission will go and do investigation. If I continue to be reported, they're gonna watch me, right? If I continue to have an issue, same thing goes where if there's a particular brokerage that as a whole continues to show up on the naughty list, the commission is going to go and have a chat with that designated broker and say, you are failing to supervise your agent's advertising. That's an integral role as a designated broker. You've got to get this in check. So it is a self-reporting type of dynamic, but it is confidential, and it's hopefully done in a way that elevates our profession versus makes us go out of our way to go and report each other for naughty behavior. Yeah, let's go. I saw Alicia first, and then we'll go up to Tracy. Alicia?
Jennifer, does Idaho have any guidelines or specifics as it relates to advertising square footage?
Thank you, Alicia. That's a wonderful question. So Alicia asked, does Idaho have any guidelines when it comes to square footage? When we talk through square footage, this is where I like to say, in life, right, as just individuals, we have mom's rules, dad's rules, grandma's rules, grandpa's rules. Mom's rules still apply at grandma's house, but mom's not there to regulate, right? Same thing goes in Idaho. We have the Idaho Real Estate Commission rules. We have our designated brokers rules. We have, of course, National Association rules, and we have our MLS rules. The Real Estate Commission doesn't have a stance when it comes to square footage unless we could prove that it was a misleading intent. If I am knowingly lying about the square footage, or if there's reasonable information to prove the number that I am marketing is inaccurate, I'm being misleading, so it falls under that parameter. But there's no direct component when it comes to square footage. That being said, the MLS does have some rules. You have to disclose where your square footage came from. So it could be that you specifically measured it as a licensee. So maybe I'm gonna get my tape measure out and go back to my pre-license knowledge of computing the square footage, or from an appraisal. You can choose from public documents as long as there's something that could be verified and are reliable. So you have to use your best judgment when it comes to those things, but you can't be malicious or misleading in your marketing of those. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Awesome. Tracy, you were next.
I think I heard you say that, I just want to make sure that I heard this correctly, that your real estate commission there encourages the licensees to, regulate or to call the commission and report that someone is violating the advertising guideline?
Yes, Tracy had asked, is this something that's encouraged? And the short answer is yes. They don't, as of right now, the Idaho Real Estate Commission right now doesn't have anyone whose job is to go out and actually try and find these things. They solely are currently going off of it being reported by peers or brokers, and then they bring in investigation to make sure that it's not, that it's okay. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, let's move on. We're gonna go on to some additional troublesome trends that licensees have. So when it comes to our core classes, as I mentioned when we started, this is a recap of things that hopefully we maybe already know, right? Hopefully we learn these things somewhere along the line, and then we come and take this core class annually, and we talk through these things to refresh ourselves. What we're going to go through next is not necessarily a baseline of the guideline itself, but we're going to go through what we call troublesome trends. Where are agents tripping up? Where are some of the trends where the guideline has been discussed to them multiple times, but the stats are showing us that licensees aren't hearing it. They're not understanding it. So we're gonna look at some figures, and then we're gonna talk through how that equates to what we can do better. What can we do individually better to make sure we understand the guidelines? And what can we do within our brokers and within our brokerages to make sure that our licensees that are below us, we can elevate them. And as a result, as we talk through it, elevate our entire profession. So some of these initial issues, these trends, have to do with lackluster license maintenance. We are not paying attention to the basics when it comes to maintaining our license. When is our renewal period? What is the education component that is expected of us? How does that all work and play a role in our world? So our first one that we're going to kind of look through, when I see this statistic, I don't know if I'm happy or if I'm sad. I feel a little bit of mixed emotions. In the first half of 2022, 91% of the fines that were received from the Idaho Real Estate Commission were for agents who did not get their E&O insurance renewed on time and did not do their educational components. What that equates to is that only 9% of those fines that were received were for actual wrongdoing. 91% of us were not paying attention to when our birthday is. Everybody do a birthday celebration typically, right? We remember that part. Yeah. It was like, yeah, we do. Yeah. Yeah. Len knows, so Len's gonna help you make sure you're on track, Spencer. Will be okay.
At least I got that drink.
This is impactful. This is important. This matters to our industry. This matters to us as licensees. Yes, Spencer?
What is the fine for failing to renew my E&O insurance?
I love that you asked that question, Spencer.
Well,
Spencer
thank you.
asked, what is the fine for failing to renew my E&O? It's like Spencer knew where I was going to go with this.
Anyway, I can help.
Thank you. So we have our umbrella here. The fee to get the baseline policy. Of course, there are different things in our world, depending upon the types of transactions that we do, that we might want to increase our coverage. But the baseline policy that you can get from the Real Estate Commission website is $155. And I've gotten it before. It takes about 3 minutes. It is not, I can do it while I'm in line waiting for my delicious Starbucks. Very easy to do. The first fine, the first time that I forget to renew my insurance on time, is $150.
Wow.
The next go around is $300.
I
The next go around is $600. You guys, in 2021, there was a broker in Idaho that had failed to renew for his 7th time. Put that thing on auto pay. Just have it deduct from the checking account. We don't need to have to deal with this. As licensees, there's a lot of things that we want to go do with our time. I don't want to worry about my E&O insurance. Yes, Nancy?
Okay, so I am assuming then E&O insurance is required in Idaho.
Yes, thank you, Nancy. Nancy's saying, is it required in Idaho? Yes, every licensee is required to carry E&O insurance.
Individually.
So there's actually 2 ways they can go about doing it. So in Idaho, if I just work for a brokerage that doesn't supply it for me, I then have to go and get my own independent policy. I can purchase it through the third-party vendor on the Real Estate Commission website, or I can go to my own private party insurance provider and get a policy through them. I have to let the commission know what I've done and show proof of payment and those types of things. If I work for a brokerage that has a blanket policy that covers everyone, then the broker does that for me. When the broker pays the bill annually, they submit to the Real Estate Commission, we're all good, and it proves that it's a blanket policy that covers anyone who's licensed at that brokerage. Yes, Jim?
I have a question, you might go back a slide or two.
Sure.
What percentage of the licensees actually are issued a fine or a penalty? In other words, I see these numbers, but is it a total of 1%?
I love that question. Thank you, Jim. So in Idaho, Jim's asking what percentage of licensees are actually issued a fine? In Idaho, we have a 100% audit policy. Every single licensee's education record, every time they renew, is audited. So 100% of the time, if you renew without having done the E&O and done the education, you will get fined.
It's still doesn't answer my question, is of the people that get fined, what percentage of licensees is that?
Oh, I mean, so when we're talking through our numbers here, let's just go back to this one where it was 91% of fines. We have in Idaho 11,000 licensees. I don't believe that we have it broken down to how many of them are on the naughty list consistently.
Okay.
I don't know that I've seen those numbers, but thank you, that's something I could figure out.
I could argue that the slide is misleading in that 91, it appears that 91% of people are fined.
Yeah, no,
You know, if I were,
I see what you're saying, yes, thank you, Jim. Yeah. Okay, moving on.
91% of the fines.
So it's 91% of the
91% of the
fines.
fines collected.
Not the licensees, so not 91% of us are being naughty. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
You're done.
Yeah.
Thank you.